Welcome to another episode of DadMode, God, Grit, and Goals. I am your host, Mike Tobias, and I am excited to share with you today just some thoughts that I've had over this last week in recognizing that we so desperately want to be right and how important it is, and for obvious reasons. I mean, you don't want to walk around living your life being wrong. That would be foolish. And so when I say our need to be right, I'm speaking of it in terms of we want to live in such a way that we are living properly, and that what we believe is right. Because if you suddenly find something out that is in conflict with what you believe, there's something that wells up inside of you. And we will want to defend ourselves. And that's happened to me many times over my life. And even this week, it happened during work. And I've had various conversations with folks, specifically in their belief systems. And so one of the things that I've recognized, and I've talked about this before in my health journey, is I felt like I had learned the proper ways to take care of myself. I thought I had learned the proper way of what to aspire. And a lot of that has just come crumbling down over the last year, and had to be rebuilt. And let me explain what I'm talking about here. So there's no doubt that we are facing a obesity epidemic, really, in our society today. There are more overweight people today than there's ever been. Now, 100 years ago, I think most of the population was struggling for food, but that's no longer the case. We have enough food. So the question is, are we just overeating and under-exercising, or is there more to it than that? And I've come to realize that there's a lot more to it than that we have been sold a false narrative. And if you don't recognize that you've been sold a false narrative, then you are going to live that narrative. And I'm talking about a false narrative that has existed probably for 100 years. And the internet, I was talking with my wife this morning. She's like, one of the problems is social media. I said, yeah, it definitely is a problem, but it is also a benefit. There are so many choices that we have today in alternative mediums to learn and understand, that there are so many more voices that can be heard because we've broken down the gatekeeping of communications. So when I was growing up, we had 3 primary channels: ABC, NBC, CBS, and then a couple of local channels that worked off of a different antenna system. And if the president was on, he was on all of the channels, and your night was pretty much shot if you weren't into politics, and I certainly wasn't when I was a little kid. So we understood the country was more unified, interestingly, because everybody was singing out of the same hymnal, if you will. And this has ramifications in so many domains. There are so many voices, and continuing down the health path, there are so many voices and so many scientists. If you're not familiar with Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Lab podcast, I would highly recommend you go check that out, because he is bringing science information to the public, and it's pretty mind-blowing, some of the people that he has on as guests. And I've learned quite a bit about nutrition from there. I was just listening to a podcast on Joe Rogan by a journalist who was, he's just come out with a movie called little boxes. It's a documentary about his mom who died of Alzheimer's and what he has learned about our food system. So this podcast isn't going to be all about food. I wanted to talk to you also about in the domain of religion. I was having a conversation the other day with a friend of mine, and he's got an interesting dynamic. He happens to be Catholic. He has a very devout Catholic sibling, and he also has a charismatic sibling. And so they are both very devout in their faiths. I have friends and relatives who are Mormons and who are Jewish, and we all have our systems of belief. And if we are devout, if we are zealous, if we are zealots, if we are pursuing those religiously, and when I say religiously, I mean like the way someone works out religiously every day. You don't miss it. That's what I mean. I don't mean the pomp and circumstance. I mean the devoutness. If we do that, then we learn more and more, and we go deeper and deeper into our faith. But we also might get so ingrained or so wrapped into a narrative that may or may not be true. And I say that with a ton of humility because I'm not a theologian. But I do recognize that we often major on the minors, if you know what I mean. It's like, it's funny and it's sad that we can believe in the same God. I believe that Muslims and Jews, Christians, Catholics, they are all monotheisms. They believe in the one God. And that happens to be the God of Abraham across the board in those religions. That is not arguable. What is arguable is it the same God? This is what people talk about. But if you look at that story and you think through it as a family story, it's a very imperfect family. And starting with Abraham, the God of Abraham. And so if it's the same Abraham, then it's got to be the same God. But the stories are vastly different, and they agree in certain terms, but they disagree in other terms. And so we want to defend our branch of the family tree because I believe in the branch that has Christ as a member of that family tree. Jews take it only so far. Mormons take it further, and Muslims go down another branch. So I just want to bring that to everyone's attention. And so to me, we can go deeper and deeper into these stories, and I feel like they're all very important. Then we can break out to other faiths. But even within that one domain, we need to have something that anchors us, and we need to be confident in it, and we need to be right, and we need to be good with that. And so when I talked the other week about the Sunum Bonum, I got some good feedback on that. I think that was hitting home with some folks. It's the greatest good. And in so doing, if there is one God and he loves us all, then he loves all of us, whether we're in any of the faiths I just described or none of those faiths or some other sect. And he's just got to be looking at us like, you guys are crazy. That we serve a God of love. We serve a God of order. And we live in a world of hate, and we live in a world of chaos. And so we need that anchoring, and we need each other. We were born to be social. But I think we can go so far down a path that we lose an openness. And when we lose that openness, then we can no longer communicate. And there is where divisiveness comes. And if we serve a God of order, I don't think divisiveness is what he was after. I think it is in our nature. I think it is our nature to be in community, but I also think it is in our nature that when communities clash, that one wants to be above the other. One wants to be better than the other. This is why we love sports, and we love the underdog in sports, the one who has risen. But then when they're there for too long, we want to see them toppled. And I think we're seeing a lot of that toppling of large structures. There's something called gigantism, that when something gets too big, it becomes broken. I was talking about this the other day with a friend, and just relating that in terms of various structures. You can look at the government, and there's one narrative that says the government is too big and we need to make it smaller, and there's another narrative that says the government needs to be bigger so that it can dole out more money and take care of people. The other side says, no, it needs to be smaller and people should be taking care of people, and that's the church's job. And so there's justification and rationale for all of these. The point I'm making here is that humility, I believe, is an important part of our faith. And that humility says, but I could be wrong, and that I am open to new information. So some of you may have noticed I've been doing some other videos that aren't part of the podcast, but they're on my YouTube channel. And I've been following along this guy named Terrence Howard, who has really kind of rocked the world. Many say he's quite crazy. He played a part on Iron Man. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. There's now been a second podcast about him with Eric Weinstein, who's a mathematician who is actually trying to be supportive to a certain degree. But the science community is freaking out. They're like, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And they might be right. But he's approaching this topic from a standpoint of somebody who's an outsider, somebody that doesn't have the formal education, and they're calling him an idiot. He is not an idiot. He's far from it. He's actually self-taught, which I think carries a lot more weight. It may not carry a lot more weight in academic circles, but I look at all of the dropouts who run the world today, like Bill Gates and not sure about Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. None of these guys finished college. And new knowledge and information comes from where? It comes from outside of ourselves. You could say it comes from on high. When you have a new thought, like, where did that come from? You say, well, I thought of it. Well, did you? Like, where did that come from? These are interesting questions. So one of the theories that Howard is proposing is that everything is alive. He is actually quite spiritual. So he's bringing a lot of the spiritual dimension into this, into a world that is so tightly constricted. And it is the world of logic, and things do need to make sense. But how do we make sense of the things that make no sense? And there's plenty of those in the scientific realm, and there's plenty of those in our own lives. I was talking about miracles the other day, and a miracle, I believe in miracles. I don't know if you're one who believes in miracles. You should believe in miracles. There's a very simple definition of a miracle. A miracle is that which cannot be explained. That, by definition, is a miracle. And so everything that is, that we can't explain is by definition a miracle. And so you may ask, is God still in the miracle performing business? 100%. He has to be, because we don't know everything. And just by that simple definition, that's true. And you might say, does prayer really work? 100%. Scientifically, prayer works because it changes the energy that we are putting out. And this is a very interesting part of what Terrence Howard is saying. What he is saying is that everything is connected to everything else. And it's kind of like the butterfly theory. You may have heard of the butterfly flaps its wings in one part of the world. It affects some other part of the world. That is true. And so our thoughts, they actually change ourselves, because you can change your thoughts in an instant. You can be very sad, and then watch a little baby. They are emotion roller coasters. Like, they can go from crying in 1 second to giggling in the very next, right? We do this with little kids. Get them distracted. Stop thinking about that. Think about this. This is a part of, I think, what God is trying to tell us in the scriptures. I think he's trying to tell us, change your thinking. Stop thinking about that. Don't worry. It doesn't add a minute to your life. So stop thinking about that. Think on something else. The scriptures are filled with this. And so there's a dissonance that occurs when we encounter someone or something, learn something that is in conflict with what we firmly believe. And the more firmly we believe it, the harder it is to shake loose. So in the practical world, I'm just going to share a couple of things that I have believed for a long time, that I have come to realize aren't true, and I've completely changed my thinking about it. And I'm going to go back to the diet side just because it's so concrete. There are many that believe that meat is bad for you and cholesterol needs to be low. I am here to tell you that if you do the research and you listen to the right people, red meat is health food and high cholesterol is not a problem. And there's a long list of reasons for that. And eggs are not bad for you. Eggs are good for you. Dairy is not bad for you. Dairy is good for you. Sugar is bad for you. And sugar is in everything. Processed foods are bad for you. And 70% of the grocery store is processed foods. Fast foods are bad for you. And we don't have an overeating problem. The foods have been engineered so that we are constantly hungry. There are no foods that satiate us. Satiation means that I feel full and I don't feel the need to eat anymore. So this idea that we're struggling through dieting is because the foods we're eating are engineered to make us hungry. If you are in the food business, your whole goal is, how do I get people to eat more of what I have? That's just normal. That's business. And that's been going on for a very, very long time. And we thought margarine was good for us. We thought salt was bad for us. It's complete opposite. We need salt. Now, too much of anything is bad, so don't go overboard on me on this. I get that. Let's use a couple of simple examples. If you cold plunge in the morning, that's good for you if you do that just for a couple of minutes. Now, if you're in a cold plunge for the day, you will kill yourself. Saunas, they're good for you if you do them for a few minutes. If you do them all day, you will die. And so it is with things that are good for us. So my mother used to say, moderation in everything, including moderation. So I liked that. And so these are belief systems that exist in society. I'm pointing these out because if you ask most people, they're going to say, yes, cholesterol is bad, and yes, red meat is bad. And it's just totally wrong. It is just wrong. It's the ratio between cholesterol and triglycerides is what you're interested in. So if you have high cholesterol and you have high triglycerides, you're going to be fine. Now, again, there are extremes to those. And this is what the internet has brought us. This is that there are access to reports. There's an entire system that has kind of lulled us to sleep, and it's driven by the pharmaceutical industry. And this isn't conspiracy theory kind of stuff. This is just facts. This relates to another topic now. When systems get very large, they become self-perpetuating, and they will collapse under their own weight, and they will collapse in one of two directions. This is what the story of the Tower of Babel is all about. The Tower of Babel is a system that grew too large, that collapsed under its own weight, and when it fell, nobody could understand anybody else. So large systems, as they get bigger and bigger, the control and the power, if it is centralized, is at one point in the top, and that will either topple and then everything turns to chaos, we have anarchy, or if it goes bad, there are large systems that are good. I'll talk more about that in a second. But when a large system goes bad, it goes bad in the angle of power. It goes into a totalitarianism. It goes into an authoritarianism. We're facing this in a certain way. There's a lot of people that think America is in trouble, and there's lots of reasons to believe that. But America is a system, and that system has decentralized power. It has power in the executive branch, in the judicial branch, and the legislative branch. It's a separation of power. It's a brilliant, genius system put together 250 years ago. And those guys came from a totalitarian society, monarchy, and said, we need to fix this. That's what they went to work on. And so as broken as Congress seems to be, and as whacked out as our political debates are at this point, which they are very much that, we have a system in place, if we don't screw it up and we protect it, that we can't get anything done without agreement. And this is why I loved, I think it was Scalia, who said, the fact that we are stalemated in Congress is not a bad thing. It is a by the design thing. The system was designed that if the two parties can't get along, that nothing happens. So let's only make changes when we all agree change needs to be made. The fact that we have a president and an election every 4 years is a forced checkpoint that says, I don't like the direction and the guy who's heading this up. It's time to make a change. Now, what we're seeing in the political realm right now is that we are seeing that there are two sides of the same coin. The Republicans and the Democrats they're opposites for a very narrow set of topics. There's a very narrow set of topics that they disagree on. There is a much larger set of topics that they're not talking about, that we should be talking about. This is why other candidates, like Robert Kennedy, are people we should be paying attention to. This is why there are other candidates, like what's his name? I'm drawing a blank on it. I'll have to circle back on that. But there are other candidates. They're supporting Trump right now, but there are other candidates in both camps that could come forward. I think the world right now is just we're in a state of confusion. We're saying, is this the best that we have to offer? No, these are the punching bags that we put forth. Who wants to get punched out this much? And yeah, it is insane times, but I'm still a believer in America, and I'm a believer in the system. Does it need to be corrected? Absolutely, it needs to be corrected. And it will be corrected when the people pay attention and the people say enough is enough. And I do have confidence that the system will hold and that we will be able to correct and we will be able to adjust. So I am highly hopeful, and I hope you are too. We do need to get out and vote, but we also have to stop believing that our vote doesn't matter and that a third-party vote doesn't matter, because actually it can if we all decide that's what we want to do. But we're lazy. That's the other problem. Like, who wants to do that much thinking? And it's because I don't want to do that much thinking. I want to ignore all of these things. I just want things to run smoothly. And I'm speaking to myself as I'm speaking to you. But that's the irony of it all, right? This stuff takes time, effort, it takes attention. And we have to start paying attention. We have to do our homework. We can't just rely on other people to do our work for us. All of these things are important, and we have to be open. So just wanted to share that with you today, that we serve a God who is the greatest good, and if we are to pursue the greatest good, then we have to do our homework. We have to have our eyes open. We have to pursue, we have to make the sacrifices, the daily sacrifice. That was another interesting, just quick sidebar of this conversation with the Catholic and the evangelist. And that is about praise and worship and about church, and what's the purpose of it, and are we to be sacrificing at church, in church, or is the church a safe place? Is the church a harbor of hope? And I think of it this way. I just think this is a beautiful model, and I was taught this. I didn't come up with this, but I believe the church is a harbor, that your local church should be a harbor, and if it's not, you might want to look around a little bit more. And we are little ships that are going off, and we're evangelizing. We're spreading the good news. We're trying to do our best to be good, put good out into the world. And we need a place to come back in and dump our junk and get refueled and refilled like a harbor so that we can go back out and do the work again. And so for me, that is what my church is. And they equip me and they send me out to do the work every day. And that the sacrifice that we need to put in is the daily sacrifice. It is the sit-ups and the push-ups every morning. It is the reading of your Bible. It is the little sacrifices that you make, the sacrifice of slowing down and actually talking to the people that are around you, noticing someone who's looking down and just stopping and saying, hey, is everything okay? It is donating to the person or to the cause that you don't know whether that's going to do any good or not, but if that's what you've been prompted to do, you do it. And you put good out into the world. So hope this has encouraged you today. I just wanted to get share a little bit of this. This is kind of how I think of things. We could be wrong, and we need to be careful about what we do believe. And I just want to encourage you today. And thank you for listening. I really do appreciate it. I love you. Have a great day. Remember, God is good. Jesus has forgiven me. I am loved, and everything is possible. Say that. Say that to your kids. Say that to your grandkids. I love you. Take care.